Hello and welcome to another edition of the Budget in Focus. I am Lieron Brummel. Thank you very much for joining me. My guest today, none other than Prime Minister Brigadier Mark Phillips. He's going to be telling us, of course, he's in charge of the telecommunications sector and so much more falling under his ministry, his ambit. Prime Minister, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Lieron. I'm fine, happy to be here. And hello to the people of Guyana who will be listening to me this evening. I'm happy to be here with you and to connect with you. And to the best of my ability, explain in a simple way what the budget means to me and to you, especially from the point of view of the Office of the Prime Minister.
PM, you wear so many hats as Prime Minister. You're head of the National COVID Task Force, which we're going to get to as well in that. But the first question that usually should be asked, we're in a pandemic almost a year now, and we don't always take the time to ask this question of the people who are at the forefront.
Yes.
How are you having to deal with all of this? Physically, mentally, how are you? You know, there's so much going through your head. Every day you're in so many meetings.
Okay. My
From a human perspective. This is from the human perspective.
My strategy is to take things one day at a time. Simple. One day at a time.
One day at a time. You sound like a man that don't take stress.
I manage stress.
Well, that is a good way of putting it. All right, PM, let's get into the meat of the matter. A fiscal package was put together by your government, $383.1 billion, the largest and given in the history of Ghana, and given the COVID pandemic under which we're operating. What is your feeling? What is your thought process on the package put out?
Well, the package is simply saying to the people of Guyana, we have a developmental plan for Guyana for the next 5 years, and 2021 is the fourth year of this 5-year developmental plan, and therefore this package, to my mind, is what I would consider the stage setter for 5 years of sustained development for the people of Guyana.
The stage setter. I like that terminology.
Bear in mind that we formed the government on the 2nd of August 2020, and we had to put together what is called an emergency budget. An emergency budget to deal with the economy that really, notwithstanding, they would have 43.5% growth. The reality is that if you remove the oil sector, the non-oil economy Guyana contracted by just over 7%. And we had to do with COVID. And we assumed office during a lockdown, if you can recall. There was a lockdown. So right away, we had to put together an emergency budget and come up with our policies to move Guyana forward out of that so-called lockdown, economic lockdown, into a rescue stage where our people, while protecting their lives, can also get back into their economic activities and their livelihood. So that was the emergency budget, and now we have the fourth budget that will run for a full year, and that's why I consider it a stage setter for the next 5 years of development, in keeping with the manifesto that we went to the election with in 2020.
Interesting. The Office of the Prime Minister has a number of sectors and arms under them. What is your allocation in this first year of the state setter?
Okay.
And then we get into your priority areas.
The current expenditure is $7.152 billion, and the capital is $5.690 billion. That gives us a total of $12.7 billion Guyana dollars. And it sounds like a lot of money, right? But bear in mind, the Office of the Prime Minister is responsible for many agencies. And that amount of money covers telecommunications and innovation, energy generation, and the work of the NDMA, information and communication services of the government, and the disaster management agency, the Civil Defense Commission. There are many other agencies under the Office of the Prime Minister that will have their separate budgets. And just to give you an idea, we have the telecommunications sector that falls under the Prime Minister's office. And here we're talking about the regulatory bodies like the Telecommunications Agency. We have the National Data Management Authority. We have the Public Utilities Commission, Guyana Post Office Corporation, and Industry and Innovation section that falls directly under the Office of the Prime Minister. In terms of the energy sector, that falls under the part of the energy sector that falls under the Office of the Prime Minister.
Right.
You have the Guyana Energy Agency with its own budget, Guyana Power and Light, Inc. with its own budget, Power Producers and Distributors, Inc. with their own budget, Hinterland Electrification Company, Inc. with its own budget. And just to give you an idea, the Hinterland Electrification Company, Inc., HECI, we have just about 7 utilities throughout the country. For example, Linden, we have the utility company that provides electricity for Linden. We have the similar arrangement for Kokwani, Port Kaituma, Matthews Ridge, Mabaruma, Muruka, Karasabai, and Letem. All these agencies fall under the Prime Minister. So they kind of keep me busy during the day, and that's why I said my strategy is to take things one day at a time.
Right.
The information sector, as you know, GNNL, NCN, DPI, GNBA, GNPL. Okay, I have Minister Kwame McCoy, Minister within the Office of the Prime Minister, and he coordinates the information sector for me. And I know he would have been on the program already. Okay, so he will inform us to the challenges of that sector and what were the budgetary allocations for that sector. In addition to that, disaster preparedness falls under the Prime Minister, and that agency responsible for disaster preparedness in Guyana is the Civil Defense Commission. The Prime Minister is also the leader of business, government business in the House of Assembly, and is a member of the Defense Board, the Guyana Defense Board. And because we're in a pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, the Prime Minister is also appointed the National Coordinator.
And that is why I asked you the first question from a human perspective.
Yes.
How do you deal with all of that? Understandable. That's a lot that is falling under there. And it's difficult for us to pin down what priority areas would be coming under there because every agency has a different priority strategy.
Every agency, indeed, has its own priority strategy, but the main focus for 2021 for the Office of the Prime Minister, notwithstanding what you mentioned about the agencies, will be the telecommunications sector, especially as it pertains to ICT connectivity. We can talk a little bit more about that later. And the other one, energy or power generation, especially as it pertains to the power generation in the off-grid areas, the hinterland. That's very challenging, but if Guyana is to develop, we have to focus on power generation in the hinterland areas.
A steady and reliable supply of electricity is critical to developing and modern society. So we've looked at the agencies that fall under you, major priority areas. What are the priority areas? Telecoms, information activity, generation, electrification generation in the hinterland. And I noticed you were touring earlier this week.
Yes.
Out in the hinterland. What's the state? If I could just pick your mouth ahead of time. What's the state of that project in the hinterland?
You know, whenever you go into the hinterland, at least as Prime Minister, regardless of wherever going into land, one thing will always come up: the issue of internet, lack of internet, or inadequate internet. So ICT connectivity is very important, and for 2021, there's provision in the budget, and we will be focusing on improving internet connectivity through the work of the NDMA in our hinterland. Very important. We cannot afford to have that part of our population disconnected. If Guyana is to be developed, we must be connected. Likewise, power generation in the hinterland area, the development of solar systems for community and for households in the hinterland. It's very important for development of Guyana.
Understandable. PM, let's take a shift away from the general talk of what your ministry is, and let's get to the one that everybody the world over is dealing with at this point, COVID-19, the pandemic. And let me have you put on your cap now as, as head of the national task force. There has been an allocation in the budget, of course, falling on the health and coming under your office at the same time. We're at the point now we're looking at vaccines, trying to get the majority, if not the entire Guyana, inoculated by the end of the year. How is the discussion on that progressing at this point in time?
Well, in terms of the government policy, our plan is to vaccinate just over 80% of our population by the end of 2021. And there's a reason for that, because the experts in the health sector, they've advised us that in order for us to achieve what is called herd immunity, we have to vaccinate that percentage of the population. So you would have recalled recently we have a donation of vaccine, and we've started with the frontline workers, because obviously the priority will have to be the frontline workers. There are more donations that will be coming to Guyana. However, in our budget this year, we've allocated money to purchase vaccines. So in addition to what will be donated, we will be purchasing a complementary amount of vaccines to ensure that we achieve herd immunity by the end of 2021. In terms of the strategy, it's basic in the sense that you have to delay the spread of the disease, and that's why we have the measures: wearing a mask, sanitizing, and social distancing as much as possible, and to reduce too much contact in crowded areas and so. Right. That will help to delay the spread of the COVID-19 in Guyana. That has worked in many countries, and there's no reason why we shouldn't follow that. So you delay the spread, accumulate the vaccines, and start the vaccination program.
Interesting procedure of which we were in all my life. I never thought that I'd be considered being part of a herd. With the general concept of herd immunity, let's just gather all of them up and give them some shots. Interesting. So, PM, let's get into the work of the task force at this point as well. In terms of procedures, we're at the point where the budget has been presented. The economy is being opened up because jobs have to be created, and people have to have the earning capacity and the power. But then a lot of persons are asking the question, what is going to be happening with the measures? And we're coming down to the end of February as it is, so we expect to hear something coming out in the guidelines as well. What do we continue to do? Are we expecting a little bit more of a relaxation in the curfew, or the relaxation of a few other measures coming out of those guidelines that are expected by the end of the month?
Well, actually, in a general sense, the set of measures that are in place, we would have implemented those measures over the last 3 months, and it kind of worked for us. The only relaxation, if I can recall, that occurred over the last period would have been for the reopening of indoor dining, and we allow bars to open. However, we are asking all those facilities that open to adhere to the 40% occupancy. And you recall that when when the bars were open, somehow the figures for the church had remained, churches or places of worship remained 25%, and there was some
Question of
question as
where's
to
the next bar that was holding the church service. I remember seeing that.
But that was quickly corrected because the intention was to, where is any gathering, any place of gathering, to be 40% occupancy. And I think that will serve us well. What is important is for the managers, the owners of these facilities to adhere to the measures. If you respect the measures as a people, that will contribute towards delaying the spread of the disease. And as I said before, you protect lives and you encourage people to conduct their daily activities, social and economic activities. Because you've seen many countries that had national lockdowns. Many times it was followed by some form of protest. We have not had a protest in Guyana. And I think we have done a commendable job of managing the whole issue of, activities to curb the spread of COVID-19 and allowing business and social activities to go. I feel that we found the right balance. And we're likely to hold it like this, of course, impressing upon the Guyanese society to be responsible. We know what is happening at the seawall every Sunday night, but we have to keep working with the people. And we've decided that, look, enforcement is not the only tool or measure that we can use. We have to encourage the people, we have to educate the people, and, engage with them so that we can have, over time, everybody just working in keeping with what is outlined in the measures. Very important.
How would you rate the response of citizens and businesses, though, in terms of the measures and the guidelines that would have been put out over the last 3 months?
I would say we have a mixed response from, and that's just being diplomatic, because we still have some business entities that are flouting the measures, but we want to work with these entities for them to respect the measures. If it means enforcing by pulling license or shutting down businesses and so, and we come to that, we will have to do it. But we want to work by educating the people, educating the business entities, having the necessary government agencies, for example, like the Guyana Tourism Agency, and the private sector working, because they're members of the commission, of the National COVID-19 Task Force, and having them engage with these entities to adhere to the measures.
Interesting. What is the procedure by which, and this is because you made reference to tourism, and I know over the last few weeks I've seen tourism sending out a note saying, hey, this lodge is open, this is, you can safely get to here if you want to get some relaxation time away from the stress of it all. What is the procedure that is required for a business or an entity seeking to get, I don't think I want to say an extension, but permission to operate that would probably be closed at this point?
Yes, they apply to the to the COVID-19 Task Force. Some applications go to the Guyana Tourism Agency too, and there's a process which involves an inspection to ensure that they have all the COVID-19 protocols in place. And once we are satisfied, that agency or that entity is approved for opening.
Goes forward. But then there comes the monitoring that needs to happen after that.
Yes.
Have you had cause since giving permission to warn or pull anybody's approval within the last few weeks?
Not within the tourism sector. We've not had any cause to pull any of those lodges or so that were recently open for tourism or ecotourism. Basically, on the report we're getting is that all of them have been responsible so far and conforming to the measures that they sign on to. However, you are aware in the newspaper there are some entertainment places that we consider to still be challenging in having them conform to the measures. So we are ready to enforce the measures if it entails shutting down businesses. But as I said before, when you shut down a business, it leads to reduced employment or unemployment. So we want everybody to understand that, look, we have the measures in place, let us follow the measures, because this is a government that is saying that, look, we want to find the right balance where we have the measures to protect our people, but at the same time we could allow social and economic activities to be conducted in a limited manner in keeping with the protocols.
Well, from your estimation, what would you say is the biggest challenge? And I think I know where the response is coming from, Dala. What would you say is the biggest challenge to government still fighting to curb the spread of the virus?
The big challenge is getting the people on board and adhering to the measures. That is a big challenge. We're communicating, and we will continue to design and redesign our communication strategies, but we want the people of Guyana, to get on board. We have to work on this together as a people. As Martin Carter said, all are involved, all are consumed.
I hear you.
And we will not give up, because every day we are seeing people who are more and more conforming to the measures, while we have those who we still have to work with that are considered challenging.
I wonder if it has anything to do with our rich cultural history, where we think we could boil some bush in the morning.
Well, I've heard about that. You hear some of these stories, but I would like to appeal to the people that, let us listen to our technical people, our scientists, our doctors, and follow the measures, because I don't think bush medicine can deal with this one.
That said, and talking on the front of education and getting persons to come, do you think the message is you're doing enough in terms of pushing the message out there?
Well,
are you satisfied with the response?
There's nothing like too much of the messaging. From time to time, we will have to go back to the drawing board and redesign, our message, or refocus our messages in certain directions, and we're prepared to do that. What we're not prepared to do is to give up on our people. We're prepared to continue working and encouraging, educating our people. And as I mentioned before, if it means some amount of enforcement, because we have to adhere to the measures. Because adhering to the measures is part of the overall strategy. Delay the spread of the disease while we accumulate the vaccine and roll out the vaccination program to achieve the herd immunity by the end of 2021.
2021, herd immunity. RPM, thanks for that. Let me shift the discussion away now. That was because it's at the forefront of our minds, keeping people safe and ensuring that our generations live on, and the business of government continues, moving into modernization of Guyana. Let's talk telecoms. Liberalization. Not too long after government came and you made that announcement late one night, and the other morning it was buzzing like wildfire. That was telecommunications working at its best. Liberalizing this sector, where are we at this point in time?
Yes, fairly well advanced, in the sense that, as you mentioned, just about 64 days after taking office, the commencement order was signed by yours truly, and we issued license to the 3 big operators in Guyana: Digicel, GTT, E-Networks, and basically what has happened since then is that there are some requests for amendments to the license, and we've gone through that process where we review the request for amendments, and we are at the stage now where we are granting those requests for amendments, because it is linked to expansion of their services throughout Guyana. And as you would have heard mentioned, anybody who wants to land a cable, come, you make your request, you get your license, and you can land a cable now, because we're fully liberalized, right? So basically, these agencies identify the amendments that are necessary for them to expand their services in Guyana. And we've gone through the process of, assuring that those amendments are, granted for them to expand their services through Guyana. Only today, I have signed an exemption order, and that is linked towards the 50-odd local small internet service providers. And what an exemption order will do is to, prevent them from having to go through a long process to be granted a license. Okay, so they are exempted from that, and they just have to register and pay what necessary fees associated with them being registered as a service, because these are the small providers who will buy and sell services, going the extra mile, especially into areas where the big companies may not necessarily want to go.
Understanding that, sir. You mentioned amendments in terms of expansion. Would that expansion have been immediately or over the course of time that these amendments were granted?
Well, some are immediate, and some will take a little time because, you have to get exports. For example, frequency allocation. You have to get exports to do a comprehensive review as to what obtains now, and that will help us to make the necessary decisions. So all those agencies, all those companies understand fully well what is required, and they're working with us.
3 big players in the market, you said, and 50 small companies.
Yeah, 50-odd.
50-odd
local companies.
Local companies, which is good.
Yeah.
Has there been interest from other major companies around the world to invest? Have they been knocking on the doors, asking questions in terms of getting into the market as well?
Oh, yes. We have just about 2 to 3 expressions of interest from international companies. And we have one company that is incorporated locally, a huge company, and they have actually submitted an application, which is being studied and will be processed accordingly.
At that time. Government is big on giving the quote-unquote smaller man the opportunity to earn it, to get into the business. And you mentioned 50-odd small companies. Is your office offering extra support to them, or do they work through another state agency, say for instance maybe Go Invest or one of these, to be able to build capacity in their little businesses, looking at the expansion as well and providing quality service?
Yes, the telecommunications agency has a responsibility there to help them to, ensure that they provide a service from a regulatory standpoint.
We talk about ICT connectivity now, bringing this all into play, and we started the discussion a little bit talking about what you would have been doing in the hinterland part of your part of falling under your ministry, your office of the Prime Minister. In a sense, is a huge ministry. ICT connectivity. What is government's vision? What is your focus? Let's say 2020 moving forward. 2021, I beg your pardon, moving forward.
Our plan is to connect 200 hinterland, remote, and poor communities in 2021. There's a huge amount of money available, and I will tell you that money was available before we came into office. But nothing was done with that money. We are now utilizing that money to ensure that we roll out the service, ICT connectivity, to all the communities. There were a lot of work done before, as I mentioned before. There is some amount of ICT connectivity existing out there, but if you go to every community, the complaints remain the same. The service is inadequate, or the system that was set up, the ICT hub, the batteries are not working, they're not getting any service from it, it needs repair. Almost every day I get a letter, whether hard copy or through the internet, about some community that is requesting assistance to have their ICT hub repaired, or have ICT hub installed. So our NDMA, the agency responsible, will be very busy in 2021 ensuring that ICT connectivity becomes a reality to all those communities that I mentioned before.
200 communities, small,
200 communities.
by the end of 2021.
Yes.
That sounds like an interesting task. The same 50 guys that are in, the 50 odd companies that are in here are the ones who are executing this? Is this on all local team, or do you have?
No. The 50 odd companies, that's private investors.
That's private investors.
This is a government responsibility of rolling out services from the government side. ICT hubs, establishing ICT hubs throughout the country, 200 communities. Repairing existing hubs too.
I'm beginning to ask the question here in terms of, do we have the local capacity to do that? Are we bringing people in to
No,
support, or we have the local capacity to deal with
many
that?
Many of these communities, all they need is the solar panels and a system of bank of batteries for the current,
Right.
and then you have the ICT system set up with a small dish that picks up the signal, VSAT.
Well, that works interesting, because it also falls into line with, because COVID has forced the world to go digital, whether we wanted to or not, or the pace we wanted to or not. And then it comes into play with education and what the Ministry of Education is doing, trying to connect and have remote learning, interactive remote learning, let me put it that way, going through the entire process.
But I wanted to be clear that there are ICT hubs out there in many of these communities, but they're in a state of disrepair, or they're not adequate to serve the communities. So those are the challenges that we have to work on correcting.
Not enough bandwidth. But equal to that is also, as you started to talk about, power generation. We're doing solar, that's the only terms of power generation we're looking at, or what are the other areas?
Well, in terms of the strategy that was outlined, between now and 2025, we want to have 400 megawatts of power available in Guyana through solar, through the natural gas, wind, and hydro. So that is our focus, our strategic focus. As it pertains to 2021, we are focusing on microgrids, establishing microgrids in many of the communities throughout Guyana, right? Basically, solar panel and a bank of batteries to provide power to the, what we call the community buildings, like the police outposts, the health center, the school, ICT hub, for the community. And separate and apart from that, we have 25,000 solar units that we're acquiring this year, and that will be distributed to the families, households throughout the hinterland community. In addition to that, we have a number of mini hydros that we're working on. I just visited one that will be supplying current to K2, and that should have been working up and running by now, but it's likely to finish by the end of 2021. And of course, there are other mini hydros I earmarked for other areas too.
Mini hydros, mini solar.
Yeah, or microgrid systems.
As you put it. What role, and this is the other part of the question, and we're talking hinterland here. So if we could bring it a little central, if it's going to happen, I think the biggest utility is the Guyana Power and Light Company. What role are they playing in this power generation at this stage? Well, are they improving, or are they expanding? What are they doing?
Guyana Power and Light is improving. The issue with Guyana Power and Light right now is not so much the power generation. The big issue is the transmission and distribution system. Right? That is undergoing daily repairs. We have an old transmission and distribution system that is challenging right now. So even though if we have enough or adequate power to supply the whole Demerara-Berbice interconnected system, from time to time people will suffer from outages, and many of those outages are linked towards the repair being done to the age distribution system. Come within the first half of this year, we have another 46.5 megawatts that will be coming on stream. So that will increase the amount of power available for households and business in Guyana. But you would agree with me that the big project that all of Guyana is waiting on is the natural gas project, or gas to shore project. And we have made a commitment that in this term of office, that will be a reality, because that is not just reliable electricity, but that will be electricity that is reliable and at a very low cost, a cost that never really experienced by any Guyanese before now. And that is the signature project for us, and that will become a reality. Not in this state settle budget year, but certainly before the end of our term in office.
Yeah. The gas to shore project, as Vice President would have mentioned, I think just over about a week ago.
Yes.
You know, it's supposed to come on stream by 2023.
2023,
around that area. So that we don't think that it's going to be immediate and coming from away, which is important to set that scene and to let people understand that it's not an immediate project. It's not an immediate benefit.
Exactly.
But over time, it's going to get to that part. And it's interesting that we started to talk about the generation and moving of electricity and cheap electricity. I've experienced cheap electricity before, so I know our rates are higher than some other countries in the hemisphere in the region. I've lived out of this country, and I've left all my lights on, burned my AC, and I still pay cheaper than what I pay for monthly electricity here in Ghana. So I understand the value of that project.
Another part of the power generation program that has been undertaken under GPL is bringing electricity to the people in the unserved areas. We have a number of communities on the coastline that are not in receipt of electricity.
On the coastline?
On the coastline. That is an ongoing project. Recently, from August the 2nd, 2020 to now, we've been able to give electricity to locations, for example, Canal Number 1, Conservancy Dam, Canefield New Area, Torkine Railway Embankment, Wallace Delight, Blairmont Number 4 Scheme. Those are places that never had electricity before August the 2nd, 2020, and they have electricity now. And we have a number of areas that are listed, and that project is ongoing, and they will be energized as soon as the project is completed.
Interesting. What incentive is there? Is there incentive for persons who may want to do their own generation of power generation? I know we were into an agreement with the Giftland Mall to buy electricity from them, but the small amount, I remember in the last term of the PPP government, you had an incentive if you were trying to, supply your own power and come off the grid, come off the GPL grid. Is that still a reality? That's a feature of the government?
Yeah, that's still a feature of the government. There are many people out there who produce electricity for their own purposes, and they have excess electricity that they would like to sell to the grid. With Giftland, that's just a first, but we are ready to look at similar offers in terms of providing electricity to the grid.
All of this that we're talking about, power generation, comes from the standpoint of government, and I'm not sure if there's any interest being shown by any private company outside of Ghana to supply us with electricity, given that this is the next hub of activities for the next decade, 2 decades with oil and gas.
Well, Guyana is open for investment, and investment can come in many forms. There are companies out there who are putting forward proposals for the supply of electricity and so. But bear in mind, we have a plan, a strategic plan that we're working with, and every such offer or expression of interest will have to be studied, and in the context of our strategic plan for the supply of electricity.
To
You
see.
have 250 megawatts that is likely to come on stream in the next 3 years. That will bring the price of electricity very low. So anybody who's coming now, with a proposal, unless they're telling us about a price for electricity that is lower than what we're likely to have from our gas to shore project, that we'll find it very challenging to accept such an offer.
Understandable. We talk about oil and gas at this stage and power generation, and then there's always a risk involved in that. So let me segue into what I'm talking about now, disaster response. This falls under you. There is a national disaster response plan, I'm aware. For the purpose of the explanation, what exactly does this plan entail? What is it intended to do for Guyana?
Now, if you're planning for development, you have to plan to deal with disasters, natural or man-made, because disaster disrupts the development process. And therefore, any progressive country must have plans for disasters, dealing with disasters, to manage disaster, to respond to disaster. And therefore, that's why we have a comprehensive disaster management plan. We have a plan for each region, okay, and that incorporates the national plan. But basically, what it entails is the different sectors, government agencies and other agencies in the country that will be coordinated to respond to whatever is a disaster. For example, if there's a flood, right, there's a response, and as you would have seen, it doesn't entail only relief supplies, but you may have to pull together machinery and other equipment to bring relief to the people that are affected by the flood. So it's basically a plan that coordinates the approach to dealing with the problem at hand, the emergency at hand. And we have this plan. We have to build capacity. The main focus is to build capacity to respond to disaster in every region of Guyana. So if you have a disaster in Region 9, you must have a plan for Region 9 that is led by the officials in Region 9, because they could respond immediately to what is the effects of the disaster there, while central government, will come in and give additional support.
The plan has already been drafted and it has
The plan has been
worked.
drafted, it's been utilized many times before, because every year we got floods in Guyana, and every year you see the CDC going out to communities that are affected by floods. They do their damage assessment, and they take in whatever relief supplies are required by the people. The Ministry of Agriculture will have the necessary equipment there to help in doing whatever emergency works to alleviate the suffering from the people. So that is a disaster plan in action there.
That's the plan in action. We're having this discussion about 2 weeks after, just about 2 or 3 weeks after we had an incident, an earthquake or a tremor. And persons were really concerned as to whether we were equipped to deal with that. What would be your assessment of the response to that earthquake that we had?
Well, to be frank, we have never had the effects of an earthquake before that we would have seen in Region 9. And just imagine if that happened on the coastline. So where it's more, densely populated. So as it pertains to earthquake, that's an area, a relatively new area for us, and we have to have a studied approach. We have to get experts, to come in and study what occurred there, and of course we have to incorporate it into our plans, to deal with disasters, to respond to disaster in Guyana. Yeah. That's a new one for us.
So I'm sure there's going to be a discussion to set up a seismic unit to
Exactly.
track, to tell you the strength of it and that sort of thing. But there's a question that usually happens. I'm not sure how, how credible it is, how factual it is, but there's a discussion that once there is the drilling of oil and the shifting of plates in any area, you're going to get some of those tremors or shakes or quakes, depending on the strength of it and that thing. I was sitting on my farm and I saw the entire Facebook going out. Did you feel that tremor? No, I'm sitting here all the time. I haven't felt anything, but it was felt across. It was felt across.
Yeah,
you know.
the trauma was felt across Guyana. I was at home, I felt it, and in the following days afterwards, you had some aftershocks and so, as were reported. But we need a studied approach on this whole issue, I mean, we shouldn't just jump to conclusion that because we drilling for oil 120 nautical miles offshore, that is causing a earthquake just about over 250 miles inland, So we have to be careful there and let the scientists be the ones to do the studies
do
and
the study and deal
determine,
with that.
what may be the cause of those of that earthquake.
Understandable. Talking about that and boosting the capacity, as you mentioned earlier, the Civil Defense Commission, the CDC, is really at the front of any disaster response that Guyana would have and responding to that. Are we expected to see major changes to the operations of the CDC as these plans are adjusted or shifted or implemented or amended?
Well, there are a lot of changes that took place in the area of disaster management over the last, I would say, 20 years, because many years ago when I was a member of the GDF, I was involved in, emergency response operation. I was seeing the formation of an organization known as the CDC to deal with disasters in a comprehensive manner. So we have seen growth in the work of the CDC from the time it was formed. We have a competent group of young people who are managing the CDC, and their efforts, their work over the last couple of years is really commendable. However, as I mentioned before, there's need for capacity building, especially in the regions, the 10 administrative regions, and we will work with the CDC to ensure we build the capacity so we can achieve what is referred to as a more comprehensive disaster management approach, to dealing with whatever emergencies that may occur in Guyana.
Let me ask you a question about, are you satisfied with the response and the work the CDC is doing?
More than satisfied, I can tell you that. Because it's an agency that, I've been close to over the last maybe 20 years. The Guyana Defense Force provide a number of personnel to really staff and manage the work of the CDC. More and more we have civilians who are employed, technically skilled people who are employed, but there's always been a close relationship between the Guyana Defense Force and the CDC, and of course the central government. So bear in mind, I would have been a junior officer, working closely and seeing the development over the years of the CDC, and then I became chief of staff where, we work in a interagency manner with the CDC, and now I'm prime minister.
Overlooking the CDC.
Right, so.
All right, PM. We're talking disaster response. We started off with the National Disaster Response Plan, but there's also another plan
Yes.
in terms of the National Oil Spill Response Plan.
Yes.
Has that been completely developed, or is it still being tweaked at this stage?
We have a National Oil Spill Contingency Plan that was completed in 2020. Those plans were handed over to me in 2020 after I became Prime Minister. And only in January this year, we had a stakeholders awareness seminar where they did exactly what you mentioned, studied and tweaked the plan, and so the issue is we have a plan in terms of coordinating any response to oil spill. Of course, that will involve the main actors in the oil industry and ensuring that, the equipment and everything that is needed is available in case that there's an oil spill. But what is important now is that we have a plan as an oil producing country, a responsible oil producing country, and that is a good start, and we need to build on that.
It's there, we're building on it. You've mentioned having the pieces of equipment necessary to deal with any oil spill that may occur. Those pieces of equipment started to come into the country, are they?
No, we won't necessarily have it. But what is important is that we have the ability to coordinate the response. Because all those companies that are operating out there drilling for oil, they have a responsibility to put together a response plan to deal with any spill. But we have more a coordinating role, a national coordinating role. And this plan sets out that role for us.
So let me try to delve a little bit more into how this coordination is going to happen. So you said you met with, there were stakeholders. The consultation happened in January, a month ago. What is the next step for the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan? Committees to be developed, works under you?
Committees to be developed, and also to communicate to the Guyanese society the plan and what it entails. That's the next step.
That's the next step. So we're looking to have everything up and running, but is there a time frame for government in which it wants to have this
plan
well-oiled machine communicated, a machine and communication plan?
We're hoping to do it before the end of 2021.
Before the end of 2021.
To have that communicated.
Yeah. Oil and gas, preparing, gas to shore, capacity building. And this is where I'm going to jump back into the budget now in terms of building capacity. I had a chat with the AG and he was explaining that yes, this has to be a part of building capacity for our people. How are we going to go about doing that? Are we going to be looking to do this from schools, educating, letting people know come up? Or are we going for the technical aspect at this stage, or is that discussion still happening?
In terms of?
If we're going to have scholarships in building capacity for people to deal with all of these disasters, be disaster ready, put the information out there.
Certainly we have to build capacity in terms of employing people, in terms of training people. That is part of the strategic plan for Guyana, that more and more we have to ensure people with the technical education, right, are available to us, not only for a disaster management plan or national oil spill contingency plan, but for the entire Guyanese economy, because many of the skilled and technically competent people, they will be a pull factor towards, the oil industry. But we need to continue investing in technical education so we can have that base of people who are well qualified to work not only in oil, but work in any sector in Guyana, because oil is not the only sector will grow, right? You will have growth in the, the hospitality sector. You will have growth in the non-oil industrial sector. And we have to have skilled people in Guyana, whether it will be through employment from other countries, but of course we have to invest in Guyanese. So from a strategic standpoint, that Guyanese could also be employed in all these areas that are going to open up with this sustained development plan that we start in 2021 with this budget.
Prime Minister, Brigadier Mark Phillips, I'm going to have to leave it there for now. We've had such a long chat. We've ranged from the general, the COVID task force. We talked about the telecommunications sector, power generation, disaster response. All of these are falling under you, and we haven't yet touched the surface of everything that falls under you. So we'd have to have another chat at another point in time. It's been a pleasure chatting here with you, Prime Minister. Best wishes going forward.
Thank you, Leron, and thank you to the people of Guyana for this opportunity to explain to you some of the plans emanating from the Office of the Prime Minister. As you're aware, there's so many agencies that I'm coordinating, and I can assure you that 2021, these agencies will perform to your expectation and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been the Budget in Focus. I am Leron Brummel, and we're chatting with Prime Minister Brigadier Mark Phillips. Thanks for joining us. Do have a good one and be safe.